Hey guys, so I just finished working out, so excuse the sweat. So Nike just came out with a pretty terrible earnings report. And this is concerning because, you expect in technology a lot of innovation coming in and therefore some players being replaced or maybe cyclical issues as well, end of quarter, end of year, et cetera, et cetera. What the reporting on Nike is all about, hey man, we didn't get all the growth we wanted in China. And that's why we were expecting a lot more growth. We were expecting 20% more growth in China, and that's obviously significant. And so the stock price goes down by 15%, which is obviously an issue because the stock price has already been down quite a bit. And so now you're seeing a lot of issues in terms of consumer demand and therefore consumer confidence. And so I wanted to just quickly talk about that because the problem with these companies and the problem with economists and journalists is that they never get the right cause of the problems. And you have to get that immediately if you want to have a chance at fixing the issues. And what's really happening is, look, the people that I grew up with that represented Nike were diverse. You might think to yourself, wait a minute, Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan, Tim Duncan, who are these people? I mean, come on, are they really diverse? Yes. Duncan, as far as I know, was a swimmer from an overseas, from an island, the Virgin Islands, if I remember correctly. Jordan was middle class, right? Didn't even make as far as we know, I don't know if it's a rumor, but apparently was not able to participate on the varsity team as a freshman. And then you've got Charles Barkley, who's from Alabama. Not middle class, quite the opposite, on the lower end of the spectrum, financially. That's pretty diverse to me. And people don't get that about why basketball was so interesting. And none of these guys were dumb enough to wave guns on TV, or on TikTok or some social media, like the most talented physical basketball player today, Ja Morant. So it really is a problem because you've got all these other people trying to develop a role model, or at least somebody who's interesting that you can look up to. The problem is that now it's such a big business that all these people that get picked, hand-selected, AAU or whatever, right? NJB, I don't know what you want to do, what they're called now, and they get effectively tunneled into this system that produces tunnel vision. So that's why if you're handpicked by a millionaire or a group representing millionaires or billionaires from a young age, they're not going to be interested. They're not going to care about you as a person other than making a profit out of you. And basketball is it's cheaper to develop players than it is in a lot of other sports. Like, Formula One, you've got tennis. And so tennis, again, talk about the diversity, right? So European players, I grew up with Chang and Agassi. Agassi's father was an immigrant, a refugee who was hosted by Iran before coming to the United States. You've got Ivanisevic, you've got even basketball, Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic, very diverse. Now the only European player I can think of, and partly it's my fault, because the game's changed, is really Luka, right? Who's a phenomenal player, but Slovenia is a small country. I've been there. It's not, it's just a little harder to keep your interest compared to somebody who's from, say, former Yugoslavia and so on and so forth. You can make a documentary about that. That's going to be better than almost anything else. And of course, 30 for 30 did. So you've got this problem of creating not necessarily role models, but just interesting people and elevating them because the system itself is designed to produce people who are, for lack of a better word, engineered for a particular outcome, which is now profit. And these media companies, and Nike and Under Armour and even Reebok, which is run by effectively Shaquille O'Neal, who should know better, and he does. He does. He's got Angel Reese. That's a good step. She is unique. So you've got these people that are being engineered, and you look at tennis. It used to be interesting, right? Not anymore. Now you got to serve, and it's sad because Djokovic is unbelievably interesting as well. But these guys all look like they're, hawking insurance companies, which they are. Steph Curry just hooked up with Warren Buffett. You've got the best, women's basketball commercials for the Yukon Star, an insurance company. It's hokey, and everyone knows it, except for the CEOs and except for these people who don't understand that when a player's only statement after a game is to praise Jesus, that half the country and half the world has lost the plot. They don't care. They know they're saying that because this person has nothing else interesting to say. And that's a problem. And that's why Nike sales have gone down, which is also a problem overall, because if you can't look to your political system for heroes or role models or people who are interesting, and I can't think of an American author, not a native-born one, who's interesting enough for me to follow these days. So you've got your athletes. That's kind of like the last chefs. You've got chefs, that's food. The old age uniter. And that is really an issue overall, because you want an economy, you want consumer spending, right, to be as high as possible. But in order to do that, I'm not spending $100 on a pair of sneakers unless I like the guy or I like the company. And in order for that to happen, you have to have people that are interesting. And if you have insurance companies or, tennis academies that are, being run by millionaires doing the hand selecting, it's not going to work. And the saddest thing about all of this is right now, this year, 2026, is probably the greatest year to be a female basketball fan. You got UCLA, like a 1B type character in there, you got the Bet sisters, and unbelievable. Much better than the engineered Caitlin Clark. And yet, that's just them. Oklahoma's teams were amazing as well. Clemson got robbed. And it's just sad, because you could pick probably half of those teams and have an interesting character that you could represent as American, or maybe some of these players are from overseas. You can represent them as well as having come to America and get their perspective, and that's not happening. That's why Nike's losing sales. Not because people in China, even people in China, have effectively sort of given up on Nike, and that's a problem, because it's going to compound on itself. Because if now you've got the cooler brands, the domestic brands like Li Ning, or who knows, all the other ones we don't know about, Anta, they've got a chance. And once somebody else gets a chance, in many cases, the old becomes old, and the new becomes new, and then we've got a new world order.